The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead like angry hornets, but Sarah Mitchell barely noticed. Her hands trembled as she gripped the armrest of the plastic chair, watching the double doors swing open and closed, each time expecting someone to emerge with news about her daughter. The accident had happened so fast. One moment Emma was laughing in the back seat, singing off-key to her favorite song, and the next, the world had exploded into twisted metal and shattered glass. Now, 3 hours later, Sarah sat alone in this sterile waiting room, her phone dead, her husband unreachable somewhere over the Atlantic on a business flight, and her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces with each passing second. She didn't notice the woman who sat down beside her, didn't register her presence until a gentle hand rested on her shoulder, warm and solid and somehow exactly what she needed in that moment. "I'm Dr. Patricia Hayes," the woman said softly. "I'm not your daughter's doctor, but I work here. I saw you sitting alone and I thought you might need someone." Sarah looked up through tears she hadn't realized were falling. The woman beside her was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that held the kind of depth that comes from witnessing both miracles and tragedies. I can't, Sarah's words dissolved into sobs. Dr. Hayes didn't offer platitudes or false reassurances. She simply stayed. She held Sarah's hand while she cried, fetched her water when her throat went dry, and called the charge, nursed to check on Emma's status when Sarah couldn't find the words to ask. For the next 4 hours, this stranger became Sarah's anchor in the storm. Emma survived the surgery. When Sarah was finally allowed to see her daughter, pale but breathing, alive but fragile, Dr. Hayes was still there, standing quietly in the corner of the ICU, making sure Sarah wasn't alone when she saw her daughter connected to tubes and monitors. "Why?" Sarah asked her later, in the early hours of the morning when Emma was stable and sleeping peacefully. "Why did you stay with me?" "You must have other patients, other responsibilities." Dr. Hayes smiled, and something flickered across her face, a shadow of old pain, quickly masked. 23 years ago, my son was in a car accident. He was 10 years old, and I was a resident working a double shift in this very hospital. My husband was deployed overseas. I sat in that same waiting room, alone and terrified, and a nurse named Margaret Chen sat with me for her entire break. She held my hand, brought me coffee, and told me stories about her grandchildren until my son came out of surgery. She gave me hope when I had none. "Did he—" "He's fine now. He's a teacher in Portland, married with 2 kids of his own." Dr. Hayes squeezed Sarah's hand. "Margaret taught me something that night. She showed me that sometimes the most powerful medicine we can offer isn't in a prescription bottle. It's presence. It's showing up for someone when they need it most, even if they're a stranger. Especially if they're a stranger." Sarah never forgot that night. As Emma recovered over the following weeks and months, Sarah found herself thinking, often about Dr. Hayes and the simple act of kindness that had sustained her through the darkest hours of her life. Emma's physical therapy was grueling. The medical bills were crushing, and there were days when Sarah felt like she was drowning. But whenever despair threatened to overwhelm her, she remembered the warmth of Dr. Hayes' hand in hers and found the strength to keep going. 2 years later, Sarah found herself in a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, running late for a meeting and juggling her laptop bag, phone, and an overfilled latte. She nearly collided with a young woman standing frozen at the counter, staring at the payment terminal with increasing panic while a line formed behind her. I'm so sorry, the woman was saying, her voice tight with anxiety. "I thought I had money on this card, but—" "It's declined," the barista said, not unkindly, but with the exhaustion of someone who'd had a long shift. "Do you have another card? Cash?" The young woman's face flushed crimson. She was barely out of her teens, Sarah realized, wearing scrubs that marked her as a nursing student. Her hands shook as she fumbled through a worn wallet, pulling out cards and setting them on the counter one by one. Each one declined. "I'll come back," the woman finally whispered, gathering her cards with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry for holding up the line." Sarah watched her turn away, shoulders hunched with humiliation, and suddenly she was back in that hospital waiting room, vulnerable and alone. She was remembering Dr. Hayes' words about showing up for strangers. Wait, Sarah called out. She stepped forward and handed her own card to the barista. Put her order on mine, please. And whatever anyone else in line wants, I've got it. The young woman turned back, eyes wide with shock. No, I can't. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Sarah smiled at her, and in that smile was every ounce of grace she'd been shown that terrible night in the ER. But I want to. We all need help sometimes. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she managed. You have no idea. I've been pulling double shifts to pay for school, and I miscalculated my budget, and I haven't eaten since yesterday. And her voice broke. Thank you. As Sarah paid for the woman's sandwich and coffee and the orders of the 6 people behind her in line, she felt something shift inside her chest. The weight she'd been carrying since Emma's accident didn't disappear, but it felt lighter somehow, more manageable. She never expected to see the nursing student again. But 3 weeks later, Sarah received an envelope in the mail containing a $20 bill and a handwritten note. Dear coffee shop angel, I finally tracked you down through the barista. I hope that's not creepy. That day you helped me was the day I was ready to quit nursing school. I was exhausted, broke, and convinced I'd made a terrible mistake. Your kindness reminded me why I chose this path, to help people, to show up for them in their darkest moments. I'm staying in school. This is the money you spent on my coffee and sandwich. But more importantly, I promise to pay forward what you did for me. You changed my life that day. Thank you. Rachel Chen. Sarah sat at her kitchen table staring at the note, her vision blurring with tears. Chen. Could it be possible? She did some searching online and found it. Easily an obituary from 15 years ago for Margaret Chen, a beloved nurse who had dedicated her life to caring for others. Survived by her son, daughter, and granddaughter, Rachel. The connection took Sarah's breath away. Dr. Hayes had been helped by Margaret Chen. Sarah had been helped by Dr. Hayes, and now Sarah had, unknowingly, helped Margaret's granddaughter, who was following in her grandmother's footsteps. It was a chain of kindness stretching across decades, touching lives in ways none of them could have imagined. Margaret Chen had sat with a frightened young doctor 23 years ago, never knowing that her granddaughter would one day be saved from giving up her dreams by someone in that same chain of grace. Sarah called Emma into the kitchen. Her daughter, now healthy and thriving, finishing high school and applying to colleges, looked at the note over her mother's shoulder. That's amazing, Emma breathed. It's like kindness has this ripple effect that just keeps spreading. It does, Sarah agreed. And Emma, I want to tell you something. After your accident, I was lost. I was broken. And a stranger sat with me and held my hand and showed me that humanity, at its core, is good. She taught me that we have the power to be light for each other in the darkness. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Is that why you've been volunteering at the hospital? Sarah nodded. Twice a month for the past year, she'd been going back to that ER, sitting with people in the waiting room, offering presence and comfort to those facing their worst fears, just like Dr. Hayes had done for her. I want to do that too, Emma said suddenly. When I go to college, I want to find ways to help people. Not because I owe anyone anything, but because that's the world I want to live in. One where people show up for each other. Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug, her heart swelling with pride and purpose. This was Margaret Chen's legacy, passing through generations and strangers, creating a web of connection that defied the isolation and cruelty that so often seemed to dominate the news. That evening, Sarah wrote back to Rachel, telling her the story of Dr. Hayes and encouraging her to stay strong in her nursing studies. She included a photo of herself with Emma, both of them smiling, both of them healthy and whole. The next week, Sarah got a call from Dr. Hayes. Rachel had reached out to her great-aunt, sharing the incredible story of interconnected kindness. They talked for an hour, marveling at the strange and beautiful ways their lives had woven together. My Aunt Margaret used to say that kindness is never wasted, Dr. Hayes told Sarah. Even when we can't see where it goes, it matters. It ripples out in ways we'll never fully understand. You proved that. But Sarah knew the truth. She hadn't proved anything. She'd simply participated in something much larger than herself, a current of human goodness that had been flowing long before. She joined it and would continue long after. 6 months later, Sarah attended Rachel's pinning ceremony when she became a registered nurse. In the crowd, she saw Dr. Hayes sitting with other family members, and their eyes met across the room. They smiled at each other. Two women connected by tragedy and grace, by presence and choice. When Rachel gave her speech, she talked about her grandmother, Margaret, about the legacy of compassion she'd inherited, and about a stranger in a coffee shop who'd reminded her why healing work matters. She spoke about showing up for people in their worst moments, about being the hand that reaches out in darkness. "We never know when our smallest acts will change someone's life," Rachel said, her voice strong and clear. "But I believe that's exactly why we must choose kindness again and again. Because we are all connected in ways we can't see. We are all links in a chain that holds humanity together." As Sarah listened, with Emma beside her and Dr. Hayes somewhere in the crowd, she understood something profound. The woman who had saved her in the hospital that terrible night wasn't just Dr. Hayes. It was every person who had ever chosen to show up for a stranger, to offer grace when they didn't have to be light in someone else's darkness. It was Margaret Chen decades ago. It was Dr. Hayes that night in the ER. It was Sarah, in a coffee shop, running late but stopping anyway. It was Rachel, promising to carry the torch forward. It was her. And her, and her, and all of us when we choose to see each other's humanity and respond with our own. The title of Rachel's nursing school essay, which won a national award, was simply Her. Because in the end, that's what kindness looks like. Not abstract or distant, but personal and present. Someone showing up. Someone staying. Someone being exactly what another person needs, even if they're a perfect stranger. Her, the nurse who sat with a frightened mother. The doctor who remembered and paid it forward. The woman in the coffee shop who saw suffering and responded. The young nurse who promised to carry on the tradition. Her, each of them, all of us. Connected by the simple, revolutionary act of showing up for each other with open hearts and willing hands. And somewhere, in waiting rooms and coffee shops and countless quiet moments across the country, the ripples continue to spread, touching lives in ways none of us will ever fully know, but all of us can choose to be part of.